Welcome to Navigating Now. This is episode 217, coming at you live from Chicago. This is Nicole Diehl here. I'm excited to host today's session. I'm really excited to introduce to our viewers Ned Wellman. He is a professor at Arizona State University, and man, does this guy have a really cool job. So let's just bring him on in and let's get started. Hey, Ned, welcome to the table.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. What's another word for like how you're coming in outside of excited?
Intentional.
Ooh,
I'll say that. There are a couple
like
things
that.
I'm excited about and intentionally bringing up in our conversation. So hopefully we'll have a chance to get to those.
Heck yeah. Yeah, I'll be right there with you with the intentionality. So we're locked and loaded. What we're here to talk about today is mindfulness in the workplace, in leadership. Ned, I didn't give our viewers any background about you other than you're a professor at Arizona State University. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you do there and also, well, yeah, let's start there. And then I'm getting excited. Let's start there and we'll move forward.
Absolutely. So I am an associate professor in the management and entrepreneurship department at ASU. And I have a psychology background. So I got my undergraduate degree from the University of North Carolina in psychology. And then I had a small panic where I was trying to figure out how to translate my love of psychology into a career that could pay the bills. So I decided to combine it with business, and in particular, business leadership. So understanding the psychology behind how people in business settings motivate other people toward shared goals is something that I'm really excited about. And then at ASU, I was offered the opportunity to teach a class called Mindful Leadership, which I jumped on because, in my opinion, as we'll, I'm sure, get to, mindfulness has so many benefits to offer leaders that I think it's a really important tool to have in your leadership arsenal. And I do want to quickly give a shout out to Tess Kelly, who is an awesome student of mine in that class, who was instrumental in introducing me to you and giving me the chance to be here today. So thank you, Tess.
Yes, thank you, Tess. When we had a chance to connect us three, it was like she never left the classroom. You guys had this just really cool connection that I could see. She's a great student, a great teammate. So yeah, shout out to Tess for making this happen. So yeah, let's dive into mindfulness, Ned. What is it like? We don't have to get the textbook definition, but how would you define it? And how would you say it's like generally practiced, like within leaders and just within like the world?
Sure. So mindfulness is really awareness and cultivated awareness by paying attention in the present moment, non-judgmentally. That's a bridge version of a longer definition of it that I use in my classes. And traditionally, mindfulness is thought of as meditation, right? So we're mindful when we engage in mindful meditation practices. But actually, when you think about it, you could be mindful doing anything. If it's sustained non-judgmental attention and awareness in the present moment, you can actually apply mindfulness to any activity. And in my classes, we have exercises where, for instance, we listen to music mindfully, or we eat a Starburst mindfully. And what I have found and what the students find is almost any experience is transformed or at least altered a little bit when it's done more mindfully or more aware. You're more aware while you're doing it than not. So that's how I think about mindfulness.
Yeah, tell me about the Starburst. How do you guys like? What's that practice look like?
Well, it starts with just there's like 10 steps that you go to eat a Starburst mindfully. And so it's basically everything that you ordinarily do, just slowing it down and being very conscious of what you're doing. So like you unwrap it, you look at it, you feel it, you smell it, then you finally eat it, and then you take your time just noticing what that's like. So I don't know about you, but I'd say average Starburst eating time for me is like 3 seconds. And we have the students do it. It takes, a minute or 2 minutes to go through this exercise. And just like I was saying, for me, I notice different things, or the experience is richer when I take the time to slow down. And there's some statistic where eating is like one thing that we're not generally that mindful of. And many people eat in the car. And it's, if you're like me and a busy person running from thing to thing, you can kind of grab lunch in 5 minutes. But it would be better to take some time to do it mindfully. And I think the same thing is true for many things that we do in our work lives, that if we just were a little bit more aware and a little bit more present while we engaged in them, we could have richer experiences.
Yeah, man. You're having me make a connection now. So mindfulness, it's rooted in Buddhism, right?
Hmm.
So we know Buddhism comes from from Asia. I also know that in Japan, because I'm planning to go on a trip to Japan at some point this year, which I'm really excited for. And I
Nice.
found out that people in Japan, you're not eating or drinking on sidewalks. You're never doing those two things at the same time, which is so customary to here in America. And I wonder it's because you can't truly be mindfully eating or drinking and walking at the same time. I wonder if that's why that's part of their culture.
That might be true. And definitely mindfulness has its roots in Buddhism, which is big in Japan. I mean, I actually went to Tokyo this summer,
Oh,
and
no kidding.
you are just walking through the huge busy city, and all of a sudden you come across a shrine where
Yeah.
everyone, it takes time, and you wash your hands in the systematic way, and then you take a few minutes. So I think the culture there is definitely mindful. And the roots of mindfulness in the United States come from those cultures and those religions. But the cool thing is that the science and what we know about psychology and neuroscience is really catching up to the benefits of these practices that people have known for thousands of years. But now we can explain a little bit more what's going on in our brains when we take the time to be mindful and how it helps us, which I think, as someone who's excited about promoting mindfulness, is great, because you can show people evidence for why incorporating more mindfulness into business routines is a good thing. You don't have to just say, well, people have been doing it for thousands of years and it works for them. You can say, well, and here's some latest neuroscience
Right.
findings to support it. So I'm excited for your trip to Japan. I hope you have a wonderful time.
Thank you. Yeah, it is so exciting that we now have the neuroscience to back it up. It's no longer this woo-woo term or this woo-woo practice. It's very much science-based. And I'm thinking of a book that I had read when I initially got into mindfulness by Ellen Langer, and her research, I think Stanford or Harvard.
Mm-hmm.
But they show what an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program can do for people in hospice, and
Yeah.
how it can elongate your life and just bring new just new brain wiring that allows you to just live more creatively, more open, and so forth. So are there any recent neuroscience research or articles that kind of come to mind that really have you, let's say, up at night?
Sure. Yeah, well, I am the sort of person that gets really excited about these kind of things. And one of the things I'm most excited about right now is what we're learning about neuroplasticity, which is our brain's ability to adapt and grow, and in particular, well into adulthood. So my father is actually a developmental psychologist at the University of Michigan, and many of the models of development that were around in his heyday or in his prime suggested that development stops when you reach adulthood, that you reach
Oh,
20,
interesting.
25.
It just stops?
You're pretty
That's what they
well,
were
you're pretty much
teaching?
fixed into. So there's
Okay.
most of your development is done.
Yeah.
And what we're learning now about neuroplasticity suggests that our brains are capable of changing in dynamic ways well into adulthood. And that has really important implications for people that have suffered trauma and are stuck in behavioral patterns as a result of that are not great, or that have addiction, or that just are not living up to maybe their fullest potential or the way that they would want to live their lives. So through neuroplasticity, you can create new connections in the brain to a much greater degree than what was appreciated previously, and override some of this programming that we thought was fixed. And mindfulness is a really important tool in doing that. So there are lots of suggestions about how to improve neuroplasticity, but all of them involve mindfulness in some capacity, because when we're able to pay attention, it gives our brain a chance to reset and grow in important ways. So that's a set of findings that I'm really, really interested in right now.
Yeah, I love it. I love it because when what's coming up for me is when you talk about fixed mindset and how we're now in this new age of recognizing you can have this growth orientation, this growth mindset. We're not fixed by our personality. Sure, there's some things that are probably going to be hard to change, but the more practice and repetition you can put into changing your behavior, it's possible, it can be done. And the same with your brain pathways and so forth. So I'm curious, knowing this research is coming out, what do you find to be the future of mindfulness? Where is it going to take us in neuroplasticity?
Yeah, so I think mindfulness can help leaders in at least three really important ways. The first thing is enhance mental health. So I attended a talk 2 years ago by a woman named Barbara Van Dalen, who is a big mental health researcher and advises the White House on mental health. And she shared a statistic that in 2020, 80% of executives in the United States reported some mental health issues, and 33% of them reported using drugs or alcohol to cope with those issues. So that really opened my eyes that leaders, even though it's such an important job and such a service that they're performing to their organizations and to everyone that they're responsible for, are suffering in many cases. And when you think about it, it's easy to understand why. Most leaders work extended hours. There are not too many leaders out there putting in 40-hour weeks. And then some research by my colleague, Claudiana Lanai at Florida, suggests that the act of leading itself is depleting. So when you're communicating an impassioned vision to someone, or you're helping someone that's having a tough day, those things are great for them, but it takes something out of you. And so the combination of working a lot of hours at jobs that are depleting suggests that if you're not replenishing yourself in some way, you can get into this pattern where you're just drained and then trying to cope. And I think mindfulness offers a healthier way of regulating yourself than drugs and alcohol or other ways.
Yeah.
Second thing that's really important from a leadership perspective that mindfulness can help with is emotional intelligence, which is a key part of the social component of leadership. So research that I've done suggests there are really 3 jobs that leaders have. There's a strategic job where you're charting the course for the future and communicating a vision that people are excited about. There's the operational job where you're helping people set goals and understand the tasks that they need to do on a day-to-day basis and then tracking their progress. And then there's the relational job where you have to build trust in people, care about the things that are going on in their lives, resolve conflicts, and mindfulness and emotional intelligence are really, really critical for that. So I think by practicing mindfulness, you can enhance your emotional intelligence, your ability to regulate your own emotions, to recognize your own and others' emotions in a way that helps you with those relational leadership functions. And then the third thing is just helping leaders be more present in their day-to-day activities. Leaders' jobs are really busy, characterized by a lot of disruption. Someone did a study and found that leaders change activities every 8 minutes on the job. And I have research that actually when you move from task to task like that, some of the energy from the previous task follows you along.
Oh, I believe that. Yeah.
Astronauts, and like when they switch tasks, part of their brain is still thinking about what they did before, and they're less able to focus on their present task. And so with the sustained mindfulness practice, which focuses you on just being present in the moment, I think you're better able to deal with all of these shifting demands as a leader and exert your energy and focus in the present moment, which is really the only time that you're able to influence other people. So that's why I'm excited about teaching the mindful leadership class, because I think by growing in mindfulness, it almost automatically makes you a better leader and hopefully a happier, healthier person as well.
Right. Oh, okay. Before we go to your class, because I want to dive into mindful leadership, I want to unpack a few things you shared. So I want our viewers to know, like we have a myth that we need to bust, and that multitasking isn't real, because what you're pointing out is you're task switching. You're never actually in 2 places at once. You're always moving your brain from 2 different things, and that requires so much cognitive energy. And the unfortunate thing is, like, you can get good at it, but you'll always be switching and you're never actually present to one thing if you're doing multiple.
I couldn't agree more. And I'll just share a funny story with you. So I used to be the faculty director of this Executive Connections mentoring program at ASU. It's a great program. We take CEOs and former CEOs and we pair them up with our full-time MBA students to mentor. During the pandemic, I spoke with one mentor who was trying to be an Executive Connections mentor and a full-time CEO. And he shared that he would schedule 3 Zoom meetings simultaneously. So he had 3 computer monitors up and he was on Zoom at 3 different places at once. So you can just imagine, how could you possibly, on the one hand, I was like, that's really ambitious. But then on the other hand, I had the thought of how could you possibly be effective at that? And how exhausting must that be? And I think we tend to do that a lot to ourselves by trying to multitask, is put ourselves in a situation where even the smartest person, you only have so many cognitive resources and you can stretch those way too thin and then make yourself less effective in all of those things by trying to be in too many spots at once.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's such a good point. You're also making me think, someone that I work with asked me, I think yesterday or the day before, because, in consulting, you're working on a lot of different projects, you're supporting a lot of different clients, and working on different stuff, and you're often going from like one meeting to another, and you might be like in the clouds talking strategy, and the next one you have to be like in the logistics and like project management space for a completely different program. And she's just like, I don't know how you do it. And now that I'm thinking about it, it's because I have a mindfulness practice. So for all of the consultants listening, that is something that me and Ned would highly recommend, because it allows you to like take those moments, even if it's a fraction of a minute between meetings, like you can be present to like try to shut your mind off a little bit and totally switch into another space because of mindfulness and having that formal practice. So I'm curious, Ned, like what does your practice look like in mindfulness, and how did you get into it?
Yeah, well, I'll share how I got into it, which was I was living very mindlessly and noticing the consequences in both my professional life and my personal life. So I was completely overstressed at work. This was pre-tenure, and I was doing a million research projects to try to get the number of publications that I needed to get promoted. I had 2 young kids in the house. I was married. We had just moved to Arizona, and every morning I would just wake up and dive into my day and then emerge at the end, usually like passed out on the carpet somewhere, completely exhausted. And I wasn't being kind of like what we were talking about. I was like the guy that was doing 3 Zoom meetings at once. I was stretching myself so thin that I didn't feel like I was being as effective as I wanted to be in any of those domains. And so I did some personal work on that to try to make myself more fully present and reduce some of my over scheduling and things like that. And I got into mindfulness through that, through my own therapy and work to address some of these issues. And once I started, I noticed the benefits almost right away. And as you shared it, the cool thing about mindfulness is it doesn't take a lot. It takes maybe 8 to 10 minutes a day, daily for 8 weeks. And you start to see a noticeable difference. So, my practice right now, I have found in the morning is the best time for me to do mindfulness, because if I let it lapse, then I just don't do it. You know, it gets eaten up. 2 o'clock in the morning comes and all of a sudden I have 6 things that I still undone, and it's hard to prioritize mindfulness. So I get up every morning and I prioritize it. I have a little journal by my bed, and I'll usually do some journaling. I'll do a spiritual thing, and then I listen to affirmations from time to time, because one of the ways that I try to practice mindfulness is by focusing my sustained attention on the positive, because of what we know about positive psychology. So I'll usually spend a little bit of time at the beginning of each day, either with affirmations, which are positive statements about life that you repeat or listen to, or gratitude, like focusing on a couple of things that I'm grateful for in my life or that I'm looking forward to about the day. And the thing that I've also found is I have to keep it 10 to 15 minutes. So sometimes I'll also do like a mindfulness meditation, but it's kind of like whatever I'm feeling that day, some combination of those things. And I try to do it daily. And the days that I do it, it really helps. And I can miss a day and be fine, but I was going through some tough times personally this past year, and I missed like 4 months. And I really noticed it. I really noticed the difference. So that's,
yeah, it's like a physical workout, right? It's, you could miss a day of going to the gym, and that's totally fine. It's, you know, it's mental work. It's building that muscle in your brain. So you'll feel it if you're 4 months out of it. But like for anyone who's wanting to try, don't stress if like you're missing a day, because it's like missing a workout. You're not going to be a completely different person, but you don't want to make it a habit per se.
that's a great point. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think maybe the Dalai Lama is able to do a sustained mindfulness practice every day.
Yeah.
But, the rest of us have other things going on in life. So
Right.
Do you
Do you know if there's any research that shows, because I know there's research that shows like how, I don't know, debilitating might be a dramatic word, but like if you watch the news in the morning and it's the first thing you do, like it can overtake like your perspective of the day, and it can have you in like a unpleasant mindset going into the day if it's the first thing you do, versus we know if you start your day with mindfulness, like you're going to be much more creative, a little bit more open, more present, you know, less reactive. Do you know if there's any research that shows like people who went from watching the news to shifting their practice into mindfulness by chance?
So that's an interesting question. I don't know of the news, but I did listen to a really interesting podcast, and I'm forgetting the woman's name, but she wrote a book called Dopamine Nation.
Okay.
And she was talking about not necessarily watching the news, but the phone, which is the thing that I would do. If I didn't do my mindfulness practice right away when I got up, I would grab my phone and I would check my email or scroll, the apps or whatever else. And she made the case in this podcast, which really, now I keep my phone downstairs now because of this, that a lot of these apps that we turn to on our phone are engineered to give us these like really small dopamine hits in our brain. And then because of the way our brains are wired, what happens is the brain compensates by reducing the amount of dopamine that we receive through our dopamine receptors for other things. So essentially, if instead of like a mindfulness practice, we're going to our phone, or probably to some extent watching the news where they're kind of jumping from shock and awe to shock and awe.
Yeah.
And our brains compensate from that. And by kind of leveling, like we're trying to get an equilibrium in our brain. So it's like, all right, too much dopamine, we got to level that out. So we're going to reduce the dopamine uptake. And the net of that is that when the stimulus goes away, we start to feel a little bit worse about things because we're now pushing down on that negative end of the scale. So that's the closest research that I know to what you're describing. But
the
net that I took away is that we have to find, or it would help us to find other more positive ways of getting dopamine and positive chemicals in the brain. And I think mindfulness offers that. Like it offers a more natural, almost slower and gradual way of feeling good about ourselves and focusing in on things that doesn't have this come down effect afterwards that you might feel if you turn on the news or spend 20 minutes on your phone.
Yeah. Oh, so I think of like what's a mindfulness activity for you that gives you like that dopamine rush. For me, it's having a gratitude practice. So just, for those listening, if you don't know what that is, it's simply like in your head or even out loud sharing like what you're grateful for in that moment. And it can be as small as, a new top that you just bought, or I'm really excited for the lunch that I'm going to have that I made for myself. I'm really grateful that I took time to do that for myself. And like those are little dopamine rushes that you can get internally to like help your mindset like get in a more positive place. So I'm curious what might be like a practice for you, Ned, that helps you get that little hit.
Well, as I mentioned, I'm a big believer in gratitude. So I'm doing my journaling. I always write 3 things every day. And I'm encouraged to stick to that from an example at ASU, actually. So there was a gentleman that used to work in the food service department. I don't know what you call it at ASU. His name is Matt Carter. He was the most positive man. Every time I saw him, he was always so upbeat. He'd say, "Hey, what's up, big guy?" Like I always just felt better after interacting with him. And unfortunately, he got really sick, and they set up a time to meet with him. And I was actually going through a divorce at the time, but I was not feeling gratitude. I was feeling crappy about life. And anyone that goes through a divorce can appreciate it. Can be hard to put yourself in a grateful mindset. But I went to meet with Matt, and I drove from my house, even though I didn't really want to, because I just wanted to let him know that he had been an important person for me, and I always appreciated interactions. And when I first saw him there, I was shocked at how sick he was. He was in a wheelchair. He was very like almost green looking. He had lost a ton of weight, and it was clear that he wasn't going to be with us for too much longer. But when I went up to talk to him, he smiled and he said, "Man, I'm so thankful to be here today. It's so great to be at ASU. We work at the best university. You're so lucky, to be here. I'm so lucky to have all you guys as colleagues." And that really made a mark on me, because I was in my feelings about something that was negative in my life. And this guy was about to die and pointing out all the positive things that we had to be grateful for. And he had such a positive impact on everyone else too. Like that's the thing for leaders. We can choose how we look at the world, and then we rub off on other people. I mean, I have research that suggests you influence as a leader the people in your own group and the people one level below that. So if you can think about putting yourself in a positive mindset and how that's going to trickle down throughout your organization and your teams and how important that is, I think that's why starting the day off with gratitude is so important. It's like in the world, there's enough negative things that we can find plenty if we look for them, but then there are also so many positive and amazing things. And for me, starting with gratitude also cues me to just be more appreciative of everything that I have. I'm blessed with, that I am fortunate to have.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, before we wrap, let's go into more of like the curriculum and like what you bring to your students. So I'm already hearing like some of the research that you like to bring in, but what is like a typical day? If I'm in the classroom, am I on a Zafu? Am I on a meditation pillow, yoga mat? Am I at a desk? What does your space look like? And what are we talking about?
Yeah, well, I have a evening MBA class is what I do for the mindful leadership. So it's a 4-hour class, or it was. It's actually changing, and I pivot between a couple of different things. So one would be, as you mentioned, in the moment mindfulness activities that we try that people could then incorporate into their mindfulness practices. So the business school at ASU has yet to spring for the pillows and whatever else. We're just in a regular class.
We'll get there.
I hope so. We'll work on that. Maybe if anyone from ASU is listening, we can talk. But so I just have them sit in the normal business chairs, and we do some exercises. Or we went for a walk one time around campus, a mindful walk, and then we talk about an aspect of leadership that mindfulness can really help with. So I try to give people both the foundations of a general mindfulness practice and also more specific in the moment tools that they can use to address situations that they're likely to face as leaders. So we talk about conflict management, for instance, and there I can talk about research on here are the emotions that are likely to come up when you're in a difficult situation. Here's a practice that you can use to manage those emotions and address the conflict in an empathetic and productive way. And then there's a time for reflection as well. So a lot of it is students getting together in groups and sharing their own experiences and then making plans to incorporate whatever we're talking about into their work lives. So that's in every class, there are 2 or 3 topics like that. And since it's a 4-hour class, there's, I put breaks in between, but we essentially follow that process for each of the topics that day. And then there's 7 meetings total. And at the end, I have people make a plan for how they're going to continue to practice mindfulness going forward, and then how they're going to intervene in their workplace somehow as a mindful leader. So the class has involved a little bit since Tess took it. When she took it, I also had the students get organized, like do a personal organization thing. But I'm not doing that anymore because the feedback that I got was more of the mindfulness piece. So that's what I have moved.
Great feedback. So I guess the most important question, is this virtual? Do you allow other people to join? Do you have another seat for me in your class?
Yeah, ASU evening MBA program. Think about it. No,
Yeah.
so it is we're moving to a hybrid format.
Okay.
We have an online MBA. However, I don't believe that there's a mindful leadership class, and I certainly don't teach it if there is one, although I'm sure if there is one, no offense to the colleague that does, I'm sure they do a wonderful job. But my class, you would have to be in person for 2 hours, but then you could join online, or there'd be other, I have to redesign it to be more hybrid in nature.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start thinking about that actually in another month or 2, but unfortunately, you'd have to be enrolled at ASU. We can't do drop-ins from
I'll take it. Well, as a middle ground, Thoughtium does a great job at hybrid learning experiences. So I know a few people.
Okay, yeah,
we can talk.
Hybrid learning is a growth opportunity for me.
Yeah,
just should have done stuff in person, but I know that there are a lot of amazing tools out there.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Ned, we are close to time here. I have 2 kind of, let's say, fire round questions for you. One, I'm just curious, we're in February 2025. Like, what are you most excited for this year?
I'm excited about AI, Nicole. That I think is a really amazing area that we're only just beginning to untap its potential for leaders and for mindfulness. So there's a real cool study. I read this book by a Wharton professor named Ethan Mollick, and he said you could actually use AI as an empathy coach, that people can interact with AI and the AI can give them feedback on how empathetic they are coming across. And that actually helps, that they then are like 80% more empathetic after working with this coach. So that is so cool for me, because I believe with technology now, there's like, this could take potentially our phones from being scrolling bad to having like a personal mindful leadership coach in your pocket.
In your pocket
with the assistance of AI.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of work developing these kind of apps, but that's a space that I think has amazing potential.
Oh, yeah, we'll have to unpack that one, because that's a loaded topic, but I'm here for it. For sure. Okay.
Well, you said quick.
I know it.
I gave you the 30-second answer.
One other question, like, what are you reading, watching, or listening to? And let's go like outside of research, outside of the mindfulness space for fun. What are you reading, listening, or watching?
Well, this is actually funny. So I'm a big life hacker. And one of the things I did for a long time was kind of unplug my TV, try to get rid of all the apps. And then I plugged myself back in, and now I'm slowly making my way through all the streaming stuff that I missed out on when I was doing that. So I'm actually finishing Game of Thrones like 10 years later than everyone else, but I'm on season 7 right now. That's awesome. And then when I read so much heavy academic material during the day that outside of work, I really have a hard time with literature or dense, factual books. So I'm a big fan of mystery novels, and Scandinavian mystery novels seem to be my thing. There's 3 or 4 authors from Scandinavia that write these sort of really dark mystery novels that I actually really like. So those are the other things that I would be often reading outside of work.
Very cool. All right. I'll have to look at Scandinavian mystery novels. That was very specific. I'm very intrigued.
Yeah, Joe Nesbo is one of my favorites. So if you want to check that out. But then again, I gave it to one of my colleagues, and she did not finish the book because she thought it was too dark. So it's not for everyone.
Well, I'll go in with the growth mindset, and then we'll see what happens. How about that?
There you go. That's all you can do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ned. It's been a pleasure having you here on Navigating Now. We'll have to definitely have another episode around like AI in the world and how that's going to maybe support people in their mindfulness practice. So stay tuned, and we'll talk about hybrid learning experiences. We can also talk about that soon as well.
Amazing. Yeah, thanks for having me, Nicole. I enjoyed it.
Yes, likewise. Thank you to our viewers and our listeners. This was episode 217 of Navigating Now, coming to you live from Chicago. You can see us every Thursday at 3 p.m. Central at Thoutium.com/live.